That is right. Today is going to be all about that bad boy right there, which is the new Timney trigger for the Glock Gen 3 and Gen 4. And just to give you a little bit of a spoiler alert, there is absolutely nothing like this trigger, both in design and feel, out there on the market today. A lot of you may recognize the Timney name and that brand. They produce a ton of triggers for different stuff out there, and they have an extremely good reputation. Now, this is their first jump into the Glock trigger world, and I have to say they really did hit it out of the park on that first try. Give you guys a quick look right here. That is your take up, extremely defined wall. Let me do that again just to make sure you got that. So, take up, wall, immediate break, reset, break. Almost no creep, like unmeasurable creep to the human eye or the human finger, which is not something I can say for most other triggers out there on the market. Well, we're gonna go ahead and be about it, not just talk about it, and we're gonna get into this trigger and show you all of what has gone on with this thing up close, because this is designed in a completely different way than anything out there that I know of when it comes to Glock triggers. I'm gonna break this down and show you guys exactly what the differences are in this system compared to the standardized Glock trigger system, and pretty much what everybody else out there is putting into the Glocks at this point, because like I said, nothing like it out there on the market. But before we break this bad boy down, make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel, turn the bell notification icons on, and be all thumbs today, specifically in the thumbs up direction. We're gonna go ahead and get into this trigger from Timney right now. All right, we're gonna jump into this Timney trigger from Glock. So we're gonna take a good look at this, then I'm gonna do the pulls because I want you to see the weight, and then I want to break it down and explain to you how they were able to achieve exactly what they did in here. So looking at this thing, you can see very nice design, chamfered off very nicely on the edge where your finger is going to come in and meet that trigger shoe safety. Got a really nice kind of logo, and that is on both sides. Very muted, very nice, just kind of sits right there in the back. They did a good job. I like the black and red, that is solid. And then the trigger shoe safety right here does go almost 100% flush. It looks like there's literally like just a minimal amount that does stick out past the shoe, but you do not notice it when you're out there firing it. So speaking of firing it, pay close attention here, okay, because this is pretty good. So there's your take up, clearly defined wall, and the break. Okay, reset, right there, there's that wall. Now I want you to pay a lot of attention. I'll try and get my finger as far back as possible. Look for any creep and see if you can find it as I'm pulling this as slow as possible. There's just no recognizable creep in here. And one of the differences you see is normally the Glock trigger would be dead right there once you release it. The way this is designed, it kind of goes to, you can tell it's not fully functional, but you can actually use it for dry fire now. So that's kind of a nice secondary benefit of how this kit is designed. Let's go ahead and do some pull tests here, and I'm going to show you exactly where this thing is pulling at, because it's pretty awesome, not gonna lie. Pulling from the same place as always. Right there, get my camera to focus in for you. Doesn't want to focus for some reason. There we go. So 3 pounds dead nuts on the gauge. So this edge right there is what we're looking for. And I have found this thing to be almost exactly the same each time that I pull it. So that one right there is literally just a hair under. That camera to focus in again for you. just a hair under 3 pounds. And that can have a little bit to do with where you pull on the trigger shoe. I always say that I pull low because that's where I try to position my finger. And then you can see that one right there is about 3 pounds and 2 ounces. I'm gonna do one more just to give you guys a good average. Do 4. And you can see that one right there again is at that mark of 3 pounds and maybe a ½ ounce. So it is extremely consistent on there, very consistent. So I'm going to go ahead, I want to break this down and show you guys exactly what they have done to accomplish this. You're going to right away notice, what is all that red in there? That is not normal. So the way this is designed is completely different than any other trigger out there on the market. Okay. That pin right there, that's how you know this gun's got a lot of rounds through it. It's completely polished from being taken in and out so many times. Thought that was kind of funny when I was putting this in here the other day. Okay, now you're going to notice as I pull up on the locking block right there, there is a different spring in there. That comes with the Timney kit, and there's a very specific reason for it. And that is why you still have a usable trigger for like dry fire, because of the way they've designed it. And that little spring right there. So go ahead and we'll pull this out, put the Glock factory parts aside. And you're going to notice that this really kind of took some cues from the Gen 5 trigger system. We don't have the standard looking cruciform right here. You just have the one single bar right there that's going to go through to connect with the drop safe ledge on the standard Glock trigger. And I'll actually pull out, here's the box in case you're interested in seeing a box. This is where everything comes in, and you get a nice little tool in there, like an eyeglass tool, to make your adjustments and get this in here and retain it. But I'll go ahead and pull this factory shoe out for you so we can compare the differences here in the two, and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about once we get it pulled out. All right, put that aside. So this is a factory Gen 3, Gen 4 styled trigger bar right here. You can see you have your cruciform, you have that hanging edge right here, and that is your trigger spring. Conversely, you see the Timney version, which is obviously quite a bit different. You can see in design, has the kind of Gen 5 looking depressions in the trigger bar right there. It is NP3 coated on there, which is a very nice coating, has some good lubricity properties and makes it easy to clean. So those are going to be your differences in how this trigger bar looks, and that comes into play with how it is going to function in here. Factory connector, that is the standard Glock dot connector in there, okay? Nothing special about it, it is just the standard connector. But we look down in here, and that piece is taking the place of the trigger spring and the rest of the cruciform. So this is now your sear, okay, right there, that edge. That is what the striker lug is grabbing onto, okay? And as your trigger is in there, and as you're pulling that trigger to the rear, you'll see that drop down right there. So completely different design, and this whole little housing is held in there by that little set screw right there. And I'll throw up a picture of what this actually looks like outside of it right up here. Very simple design, drops right down in there. Like I said, they took a lot of cues from this from the Gen 5 triggers. If you know what a Gen 5 trigger looks like, this is where they've got some of these ideas from, at least in my opinion. So a very nice setup. Now, talking about the trigger shoe, and there's a reason I saved this for last. You'll notice right there in that trigger shoe, there is an adjustment screw right there. And they do give you the tool to adjust that in there with that little kind of eyeglass screwdriver they give you. What that's going to do is it will change the angle of how the shoe interfaces with the bar, and that can further reduce take-up. Okay, that's where people get themselves in trouble with adjustable triggers. If you get into the adjustments here and you want to remove some of that pre-travel, you need to make dang sure that you are staying on top of that drop safe ledge right here and right here, okay? Do not be the person that tries to adjust this trigger all the way back to where you've made your setup unsafe. I found that where it was adjusted from the factory, all safeties were intact, and it was absolutely outstanding. I don't need any more take-up reduction. That first pull and then where the reset is short enough to where if you know how to work your trigger finger, you know how to work your digits, you're going to be absolutely fine with this setup. I'm going to go ahead and put this back together. We're going to talk about more of that range footage because this trigger is worth showing more of it. We're going to talk about the price point and where other triggers now fit in compared to this one. Now, I don't know about you, but I have not seen another trigger for the Glock platform that has been designed like that. We're going to talk more about the price in a minute because I definitely have some feelings about that as compared to some of the other trigger offerings out there from those large companies that are charging what they are charging for these triggers, knowing what we know now about this Timney. Well, let's go ahead and take a little bit more time to appreciate this thing with some more of that range footage. It's just a whole different level, not only on design, but the feel out there on the range with that short take up, that immediate wall, that super crisp break, and of course, that short reset. Now, talking about other trigger companies out there, this thing is coming in right now at $150. And like I said, just nothing else like it out there. You see that whole new kind of drop-in design they did in the trigger housing group, that new spring that comes up on the trigger, which actually gives it the ability to just kind of remain like a usable dry fire trigger now too, which is pretty cool. But there is a lot of thought, a lot of research, a lot of machine time, and probably a lot more cost going into making this trigger system as compared to just companies that do like a trigger bar and a trigger shoe. Now, don't get me wrong, I still love some of the other trigger companies out there, Overwatch, Apex, even the Steel City stuff. The only one that I've never really had great luck with is going to be the Agency Arms. In fact, the only one I've ever been able to get that thing to perform right in is the Nomad frame, which is weird because a lot of other people have not been able to get certain triggers to work in that frame because it's a lot tighter than the factory Glock frames. But speaking of Agency, they charge $150 for a trigger shoe and a trigger bar. This whole setup is $150. I know that something like this costs more to manufacture because just look at the stuff that went into it. I think we've got a lot of questions to start asking about why are other companies charging what they do, especially if it's $150 for a bar and a shoe, now when it becomes compared to something like this Timney. So Timney might have just started kind of a revolution in the Glock trigger world when you think about it, not only for function and feel, but for that price point compared to what you're actually getting. Now let's talk about that pull weight on there. There's 3 pounds almost every single time, or extremely close, within an ounce or two of 3 pounds. That is pretty crazy for a trigger to be that consistent, that crisp with no take-up. I mean, you really can't feel the take-up. You might be able to, but to my eye, even when you look at the video, I don't see any noticeable take-up in there. Now that 3 pound rating is extremely light. This is kind of marketed as like a competition trigger. I'm gonna say unless you are extremely used to using very light triggers, this thing is going to be a definite surprise to you. The only thing I can compare this to in this is going to be, not even in the Glock world, but maybe in the M&P world, the Apex flat face trigger with the light spring in it. Now the Glock by design is going to have more take up because of how that trigger system in here works differently than the M&Ps, but as far as that wall, the weight, and that break, the only real thing I can compare it to in the striker fire market is going to be that M&P flat face from the people over at Apex. So talking about this trigger overall, let's talk about the looks category. I give it about a 6 out of 10. It's a good looking trigger. They've got a nice little logo set up in there. When it comes to the feel, the actual tactile feel of the engagement of your finger on this trigger, it is solid. They've got a nice chamfered edge to the shoe. The trigger shoe safety goes flush, and it overall feels good on the finger. You don't have that weird center part poking out, digging into your finger that just kind of feels odd. Yes, you get used to that, and no, it's not going to give you blisters, but it just feels weird and it kind of sucks. They never should have had that design like that in the first place, in my opinion. and they've left it to the aftermarket to correct some of their factory mistakes. So I'm giving the overall tactile feel about an 8 out of 10 because it is just solid. Now when it comes to the functionality of it, like I said, there's nothing else out there in the market right now that I know of. If you know of something else that's going on like this in the Glock market, definitely leave me a comment down below and let me know what it is. I gotta say it's a 10 out of 10. Not only the reduced take up, the reduced reset, that wall, that clean crisp break, and zero creep. Now I know some people like a rolling wall. That's not my thing. To the people that really love rolling walls, I would say go out and take a couple good, speed combat related pistol courses or something like that. You're going to find out rather quickly under stress, you probably don't want a rolling wall. You want something that is clear, defined, and you know that point where when you need to take it to that next step or not. If you got a trigger that got a lot of creep in it and stuff, that's just never been my thing, and most people I know, that's not their thing that carry guns for a living. They want to know where the wall is, when they can break the shot, or when they need to back off of that trigger. Now, being that Timney did send this out to the channel, which is very cool, thank you, Timney. I did not think they were going to send one out. I just happened to email them out of the blue and we're like, hey, I would really like to test one of those out. They got right back to me and sent one out, which is pretty cool because they're a pretty big company and I'm a pretty small channel comparatively to others out there in the market. So knowing that stuff, 150 bones, 150 hard-earned cash money American dollars, would I buy this trigger? Without a doubt. So I actually have plans on buying another one of these and testing it in polymer 80 frames, strike 80 frames, Nomad frames, and factory Glock frames because I want to test batch 2 on this. And I want to know if it's going to be that good twice and in multiple different frames. Sometimes if you don't know when it comes from Glocks to frame to frame to frame, you can get a different feeling even with the exact same trigger, the exact same kit in a different frame due to some tolerance differences. That came very apparent to me when I was testing Gen 5 Apex triggers and I was putting them in different frames. I've noticed that in a certain frame, like a Glock 45 frame, it would have a little bit more creep in it. And then when I put it in like a 19 frame, it would have a little bit less. That has nothing to do with the actual aftermarket trigger company. That has to do with the factory Glock frames and kind of how wide or loose or tight those things can actually be. I will try to leave links for this stuff down below for you, or you're probably going to have to check my website if you were checking this out on YouTube. I think only Timney, the company right now, is selling these. I don't know if aftermarket companies even have them in, and I don't have an affiliation with Timney besides them being cool enough to send this trigger out for test. So if there are links out there or promo codes or anything like that, I will find those and link those at my website or on somewhere else in the links down below. But that is the video and that is what I've got for you today. So if you are looking to get into the Glock trigger game and you've got something around that 150 budget, definitely one to take into account. There are cheaper options out there, but like I said, there is nothing out there in the market that's got this game going on like the Timney one does. Make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel, turn the bell notification icons on, definitely give the video a thumbs up. All of that stuff really does help the channel. Huge thank you to all of my Patreon supporters. And of course, these sponsors of the channel here, which are going to be Blackout Coffee, Shall Not Comply Clothing, USCCA, and a couple of other people that I probably forgot about that I should throw in here. Either way, you guys get out there, have some fun, do some dry fire practice or whatever you can to stay proficient. Remember, if you stay ready, you ain't got to get ready. I will see you guys on the next one.